This is Hi, Pankaj. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
Hi, Ishita. I'm
Hi.
audible?
Yes, quite clear.
Okay.
I'm just going to call Prasad and check. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay, I've given him a call, so we'll just wait for a few minutes. Do you want to try sharing your screen and checking if it works?
It says disabled.
Oh, yes, fine. Okay, one second. Sorry. Can you try now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you able to see the PPT?
Yes, quite clearly.
Okay. All right.
So I have a feeling we are quite on time, but we'll have to give it at least 10, 12 minutes before we can start.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine.
And everyone who's here, thank you so much for joining in time. But we will wait a few more minutes.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you everyone for joining in just in time. We're just giving it a few more minutes to see if more people can join in. In the meanwhile, I would like to bring to your notice that the session is being recorded as well as we are live on Facebook through the page of Curating for Culture. And while we wait, if anybody wants to just unmute, talk to us, at least one of the speakers is here, Pankaj Modi, and I am Ishita Shah, I'm the moderator for the evening. If anybody wants to just say hello or tell us what you are working on or why you are here. If there are any students in the audience, we would love to know. If you can just even raise your hand and let us know that you are here. All right. Hi, Maurya. Good to know that you are. Right. Priya, hi.
Hi there.
Yes.
Hi, Priya.
Checking it out.
Hi there. How are you doing?
Hi.
It's really good to see all of you here. It's so nice to see the support and the participation. So thank you, Pankaj, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Ishita.
Pleasure is all mine. Priya, I did try reaching Prasad. Would you want to try it once again before we get started? Because I couldn't get through you. You're on mute, Priya. Sorry.
I certainly will try. I will just try and get hold of Prasad. I'm just sending him a message as we speak. Why don't we do this in the meanwhile? Why don't we start?
Right.
Yeah,
we'll flip the order. Yeah, is that what you are referring to?
Little bit, yes, I think so.
Yeah,
so we're at 5:39 at the moment.
Yeah, so I was just waiting until 5:40 so that especially waiting
let's
for
do
you,
that.
and then we can start.
I'm also going to call him while I'll put this on mute. Just give.
Sure. Okay, I think I'm going to use the first few minutes anyways to welcome you all and get us all started. So hopefully the logistics will be clarified in the meanwhile. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first mentoring session towards the Heritage Essay Writing Competition. This initiative is brought to you by Heritage Beku in collaboration with Curating for Culture and Destination Heritage. I'm Ishita Shah and I'm your host and moderator for this evening. And I am a part of this collective called Curating for Culture. I will share the website links of all these organizations in the chat for your perusal. Before we get started, I would like to inform you all that this webinar is being recorded and shared live on Facebook. We will also be disseminating it on YouTube for the prospective contenders of the competition. So we hope that we have your consent for the same. All in the audience are requested to please keep your devices and Zoom handle on mute to avoid any disturbance. We will request you to unmute when you want to ask a question or share a thought. Until then, please use the chat window to share your thoughts, so don't hold them back. We want to make it as informal and interactive as possible. If it is convenient, please keep your video camera on so that the interaction is a bit more livelier for everyone involved. I think we all have been living across the screens for too long, so it'd be nice to see some smiling, surprised faces. With that, I'm going to now invite Priya to tell us a little bit about Heritage Beku before we start with the evening. Over to you, Priya.
Thank you so much. I'm going to make this short. First, it's a really great start to the Dasara week. And Heritage Beku has been, super excited, focused on a lot of different things in the last 3-4 years, which has been primarily on policy dissemination and, of course, ensuring a larger reach out of heritage. And where best do we start other than with people who have really the future in their hands? I think people like us are going quickly into being relics ourselves. So the idea is if heritage gets carried forward by the wonderful people who are right here and the younger people who really are getting more interested but need the right input, the right push, the right direction, that would be great. That's really what we want to do. So I want to thank Ishita and Geeta and all the organizers who have really tried to sort of put something of interest together. I will hand this back to Ishita and to my other colleagues on this. I just want to reiterate that Heritage Beku is a citizen initiative. We have a lovely set of MOUs in place. We have a lot of interaction going on with government, with other stakeholders, with publics, with RWAs, with wards. But we do things on a very, very responsive basis. And I think we've really not just done things, but also enjoyed what we do. Before I hand it over, I'm going to say something that has meant a lot to me, and I think continues to sort of underpin the basis of Heritage Beku and many people like us who are trying very hard, and sometimes we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. But this helps me understand this a little better. It's Jacques Cousteau's line, which says that you can't love, you can't save what you don't love. You can't save what you don't love, and you can't love what you don't know. I think this is just part of the cascade effect, that we're trying very hard to know something, hopefully to love it, and maybe even more optimistically at some point with those two in place to even save it. So over to you, Ishita. Many, many thanks, and look forward to a wonderful next couple of weeks in terms of taking this forward. Have fun, everyone.
Thank you so much, Priya. And I think that quote was just befitting to get us started for this evening, but also for this larger initiative. I'm just going to quickly share my screen to say something that I must say before I hand it over to the presenters. Just give me 1 second. So yes, I would like to reiterate why we are all here. As much as yes, we're excited about all these professional practices and the different speakers who will follow in the coming weeks. But why we are doing this is because we have initiated an essay competition for students, aka citizens, who are between 12 to 17 years of age group, so that we can get the dialogue going about heritage, conservation, management with minds more than one. So we request you all to please spread this information within your networks, within your RWA groups, and wherever else you might find it relevant. I'll again share the links with you in the chat box after I hand it over to the presenters, so that you can forward it as soon as possible, as soon as this event is over. Prasad, I wanted to reconfirm, should we start with you or should we start with Pankaj first?
Very happy. Thank you.
Yeah, you should go ahead with Prasad.
Okay. All right, so thank you to both our presenters for taking on the mantle for the first mentoring session. Our first speaker, Prasad Bidapa, is a Bangalore-based fashion stylist and choreographer for various fashion events and shows. A textile expert himself, he has presented at the Rajasthan Heritage Week since 2015. He will speak to us today about the textile heritage, which is endangered, and how we can help the weavers and artisans of this ancient arts survive. He believes we need to make these textiles fashionable and relevant globally. Over to you, Prasad.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's really an honor being on this panel. And I do hope that the recording of this also will reach a lot of other young minds and inspire them to take part in the contest that we have put together. Now, why did we put this contest together? It's because we want to celebrate memory. And heritage is really all about memory, isn't it? Because we are a civilization that relies on memory, relies on history. We rely on everything that has gone before, so that we hopefully do not create the same mistakes the next time around, and that there is a record of everything that goes before us, a record of what our ancestors went through, a record of what our civilization went through in terms of architecture, in terms of literature, in terms of art, of music, of dance, of textiles, of all the various things that collectively make up the heritage of our country. And let me tell you at this point that I believe that India has one of the richest and strongest heritages of any country anywhere in the world. We have a civilization that's older than most. I like to believe that we were playing musical instrumentals and learning dance while the Europeans were still spreading blue clay on their faces and living in caves. I believe that the Indian civilization developed much faster than anybody else, and that I feel that history needs to be rewritten on many levels to appreciate what India has achieved in the years before Western historians took over the recording of history, and they negated what Indians had done. They forgot what Indians had contributed to the process of civilization, and they gave it a Western slant, and now they make it seem like only the West developed in terms of civilizations. It's not true at all. We here in India are privy to a huge amount of knowledge that comes to us from the Vedas, that comes to us from the epic books that we, use as historical reference markers. And I think it is each one of us have a duty to remember, a duty to write down our memories and pass it on to the next generation. And in effect, this is what we are trying to do now, to get young minds like you inspired to write about the past, to write about the present in the context of tradition and history, and make it a record which will last forever. Because what you write today, children may study tomorrow. And the winner of this contest will definitely have a voice in the future, and it will inspire you to go beyond your everyday musings and your everyday jottings to write about our culture and our history in a way that will always keep it relevant and always keep it inspiring young minds and teaching the next generation about what this generation has gone through. Why does Heritage Beku does what it does? It believes that there are many things that are worth remembering, many things worth celebrating in many aspects of, our different aspects of our civilization, like I mentioned, literature and dance and music, architecture, and all the wonderful things that go towards making the markers of how we develop as a civilization and as a society. So my job today was to talk about textiles, because you see the traditional textiles and the heritage fabrics of India, I truly believe sing the song of our history. If you trace a technique of block printing like Ajrak, it is a very special block printing indeed, because it is the only one where the fabric is printed on both sides, so that Ajrak creates a very rich texture, and you can't tell which is the right side and the wrong side, because both sides are printed so beautifully using vegetable dyes like madder, like indigo, like iron, and all the different vegetable dyes and colors that we have. And the block itself is made of wood, and the block printer prints it beautifully on textile. And we have found examples of Ajrak block printing in Mohenjo-daro, which makes it 3,000 years old. So that means 3,000 years ago, Indians were printing fabric, which itself is a marker of how civilized we were, of how sophisticated we were. You see, because nobody else was doing it in the world at that time. In fact, they would be lucky to even be wearing clothes at all. Many of them were still wearing animal skins at that time, or covering themselves with bark or leaves or things like that. Whereas Indians were being extremely sophisticated. We were already building lovely architecture. We were playing great music. We were printing fabric. So you see, the textile traditions of India are really amazing. And why is it important? If you remember, till the year 1947, we were controlled and ruled by the British. India only received its independence in 1947. But the freedom struggle began many, many years before that. And Mahatma Gandhi, who is, I think, one of the greatest figures in our history, was the man who achieved our freedom by using Indian textiles as a weapon without violence, by using it to gain us our freedom, and by using khadi, and he called it the fabric of freedom. And let me give you a small history on this. India was a very, very rich country in the old days. We were exporting to all over the world, and one of the things that we exported mainly were textiles, beautiful silk fabrics, cotton fabrics, woolen khadi. We were exporting it all over to the Christian Empire in Rome and to different countries in Europe. We were exporting to China. We were exporting to the Balkans, to the Russian countries. And there were so many of the Indian techniques that were going to these places also. So the British came and saw how much of money India was making from doing these beautiful textiles. And that's when they invented the power loom. India was working on the hand loom. We never mechanized, we did everything by hand. And when the British came in and they started mechanizing the manufacture of textiles, they realized that they had a product that they could sell all over the world. And therefore, they started discouraging the manufacture of Indian textiles, and they actually broke the looms of India and prevented us from making fabric. And in turn, they made all this machine-made fabric in Lancashire and Manchester and in all the different counties of England, and they were exported all over the world. And England became a very rich and very powerful country because of this export. That's when Gandhiji realized that he could use this as a tool of resistance. And he told all Indians, stop buying English fabric. If you stop buying English fabric, you will be able to break the back of their business and they will not be able to go forward. Instead, go back to the handloom, revive the handloom, and let's all start wearing khadi. And that's why India then started wearing khadi again. And that's why it was called the fabric of freedom, because we burnt all the fabric that the British sent us and we started wearing khadi again. What is khadi? Khadi is a very simple definition. Many of you have seen the charkha, on which we spin thread. So when you spin thread on a charkha, and that thread is taken to a handloom and woven into a fabric, that fabric is called khadi. So khadi is defined as a fabric that is made from hand-spun yarn and hand-woven into a beautiful textured fabric. And this khadi is one of the most beautiful and strongest fabrics in the world. And in India, we learned to dye them in many beautiful colors. All our colors came from nature. We got the red of madder, which is a root. We got indigo, which is a plant. We got things like haldi, which
I believe this was a power cut. So we'll just give it.
These wonderful fabrics. And then Mahatma Gandhi encouraged us to wear khadi more and more. And that is how we managed to break the British economy and make India free. And that is why khadi is called the fabric of freedom. So in your essay, you could write about any of the varieties of khadi, because besides khadi, which has hand-spun thread and hand-spun fabric, we also have the great handlooms of India. What are these? These are the saris of India. Many of you all have seen your mothers wear Kanjivaram saris. That comes from Tamil Nadu. In Karnataka, we have a variety called Dharwar cotton or Mulkal Muru. Then we have the great ikkats of India. From Andhra Pradesh, we have Pochampalli. From Orissa, we have Sambalpur. From Patola, we have in Gujarat, we have Patola. These are the great ikkats of India. Then we have the beautiful Banaras sari. Then we have the Paithani of Maharashtra. Each sari is like a song to be sung, so beautiful. Each one has a history behind it. And these are the textiles of India that you could research and write about, because many of them are in danger of being lost. And why are they in danger of being lost? Because we have stopped wearing them. Today, we want to go to Zara, we want to go to H&M, we want to buy smart and fashionable clothes that cost a lot of money, but every bit of that fabric has been made on a machine, dyed by a machine using chemical dyes. It's printed using machinery. There is nothing that is handmade about it. And why is handmade so important? Because anything made by hand is luxury, because it is something that is so beautifully done that you have to concentrate and take so much of trouble to make things by hand. And then it becomes something so fine that people like the Japanese, they love the handmade textiles of India. The Russians, they adore the block printing of India, the ikat of India. They buy so much of it. But we ourselves in India have started forgetting khadi, forgetting handloom, and we need to bring this back. And to many of you all, you could use that as the subject for your essay. You can research about the different textiles, the different saris of India. You could weave a story around that, or you could weave a story around some of the beautiful architecture, the heritage architecture we have in this country, not just the monuments, but also beautiful buildings in our own Karnataka. When you look at even buildings like the Vidhan Saudha or the Mysore Palace or the Bangalore Palace, they all have a history behind them. Maybe you could write an essay on something like that. Or maybe you could choose something in music. We have Carnatic music coming out of the south of India. And they say that one of the reasons that Tamilians are so clever is because they teach their children to sing shlokas, while all the others teach their children nursery rhymes like Jack and Jill went up the hill. So instead, if you learn shlokas, they say that your brain becomes very sharp, and that is why we have such great mathematicians in South India. It's because of learning shlokas at a young age that your mind becomes very sharp. So think of all the different aspects of heritage that you can write about, write an essay about. You can go and study a part of Bangalore like Baswangudi. You can go and do a part like Jayanagar, which is also very old, or Alsur. You can track the history of these cities within the city and tell us the history of it. So there you are. I'm giving you lots of ideas, and that is what we are talking about when it comes to heritage. So each one of you all must celebrate the heritage of our country and take it forward, write it down. Let it not be said that Indians don't know how to write their history down, that we only know how to speak it. Let's start writing it, and let's start with you kids, because you all are going to do a fantastic job. And I'm looking forward to reading all your entries, and all the very best of luck to every one of you. Thank you for having me on the panel.
Thank you so much, Prasad. I mean, it was very, very comprehensive to begin and to get us all thinking about all the possibilities in this essay competition. I'm sure we will have questions and sort of a dialogue with you after Pankaj presents, and we look forward to that. Over to our next speaker. Pankaj Modi is a conservation architect by practice and has been involved in many roles towards conservation of our heritage for the last 2 decades. He's actively involved with Intach Bangalore chapter on a variety of conservation projects, and he's also a partner at Saitu, a conservation collaborative that works on a diverse range of conservation projects, from documentation to restoration to heritage assessment, working for Archaeological Survey of India, Nimrana, ITC, and others. Thank you for making time to meet us, Pankaj. Over to you.
Thank you, Ishita. Thank you, Priya. Thanks, Prasad. So yes, good evening to all, and it's a pleasure to share what my works have been at Intach and what we at Intach. A lot of things that we do here are quite interesting for the conservation of heritage. So I have a presentation, and I'll share that as I talk. And please feel free to stop me anytime at any of the slides so that we can have a discussion right then and there. That's always an interesting thing. So all of you are aware that we have abundance of heritage, and like Prasad was just sharing about the diverse heritage that we have, from art, architecture, to textile heritage, to medicine heritage, to industrial heritage. I mean, practically every field has a heritage of its own. It's just not always architecture. There's so many stories that we have which has resulted in how things have come over from generations over the past, how they have evolved to reach what we have today with us, and across all fields. Like you can just name it, and there will be a story to it from its past that comes. And that is something that we need to really know and appreciate. Like Priya really said it well. Like, we will save only if we love, and we will love only if we know. And that knowing is something very, very important. That appreciation for anything will come only if we have an understanding of it. Otherwise, it's like, okay, something's beautiful and all that, but then something more has to be there to understand about it, which will help us appreciate it, and therefore give us a reason to, preserve it or conserve it and make it part of our continuity. So that's what I feel. And Intach Bangalore chapter. So let me just broadly tell you what Intach is. It stands for Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. So there's been abundance of heritage in India. I mean, there's like a building every street we walk. There are cities which are historical and all that, and not many of these are protected. Most of them are, like, very few are protected by the archaeological departments, and beyond that, nobody is looking into it. And this is the reason that in 1984, Intact was set up to look at all the unprotected heritage that nobody is working towards conserving. And that's when Intact started as an NGO from Delhi. Rajiv Gandhi was its first chairperson. And from then on, we have increased to more than 200 chapters across the country. Today we have more than 200 chapters, and each of these chapters are like citizen driven. So it is all like the volunteers from the city who have a feel for the heritage. It's nothing to do with being technical on the subject. It's nothing to do with that you need to have a certain background. As far as you have an interest in the heritage, you can become part of this NGO and become part of the conservation process and conservation activities that we do across the country. And in one of the budgets in 2013, it was also declared as Center of Excellence by the Government of India in the finance budget that's there. So as I said, that we have chapters, and we are from Bangalore chapter. So under Karnataka, there are quite a few chapters, and we focus on activities in and around Bangalore to look at the conservation works over here and other works also. I'll tell you more about what we do. What's interesting is, why do we need to preserve heritage? Prasad did talk a lot about it and was also guiding you on what and how the topics can be for your essay. But to begin with, we have it right in our constitution, Article 51A, which says that it's the duty of every citizen of India to value and preserve the rich heritage. Irrespective whether you're a private or a government person or something, it just is important that all of us work towards this Article 51E. And besides that, it makes a lot of sense, because it helps us relate to the city. If we go to different cities, we can identify with the buildings, with the food that's there, with the dance forms, with the culture, which gives the identity of that place. And that is some sense that we all need to have to place ourselves in the sense of identity. And then there's an economic sense which heritage has. There's an environmental benefits which the heritage brings in. So what does Intact do? And Intact has many areas in which it works on, primarily the architectural heritage. But that, as I said, is not the only area. So we have art heritage. So we have a material heritage division which works on that. We have a division which works on the crafts and communities, which also look at different regions of the country. We have a knowledge center. We do listing that is basically identifying what is the heritage stock in the country. Recently we have come up with a book of called as the State of Built Heritage in India. There's tourism that's there, and a lot of focus on the intangible heritage. There are a lot of traditional practices that we do, rituals which we do, which are all part of our heritage identity, and that needs to be recorded. That also needs to be understood, and that's one area we work on. Natural heritage is one area we work on, as well as creating awareness, creating knowledge base, and then disseminating them through our heritage academy or heritage education services. So there are a lot of these divisions in Intach, and they work on all these aspects. So we have many outreach programs at Bangalore chapter here. We do technical works also, like conservation and restoration. We have architects, engineers, conservation architects as part of our team. Then we do a lot of outreach programs where anybody who's interested can join us to create awareness through different ways, and that I will explain a bit. So talking of the technical projects, we do a restoration work. This is one of the projects which was funded through a CSR activity by Mineral Enterprises, Fort High School. We restored that recently, and a lot of it also involves in conserving our traditional methods of construction and techniques, many which are even relevant today. So we look at a lot. It's just not about the building and its architecture or appearance, but it's also about how the building was built, what techniques were used, what tools were used. We kind of explore and research all these things and then kind of adopt it. So we look at these as a continuing tradition of skilled workmanship in construction. So that's something. So this was the program we had at the inauguration of this project in March, where again we looked at our classical singing and the heritage that we have, and that was one of the performances we had. Another project that we did was the octroi building, or the such buildings are abandoned, octroi gate, like trees growing in, nobody goes there, and it just collapses one fine day. So this was an initiative which the police commissioner himself took, and called Intach to restore this. And we finished the restoration just after the COVID time. So this is one building which has been restored again, as I said, like demonstrating the traditional skills of constructions and methods. We also do projects where how do we take these buildings of the past and into contemporary time, like what use can we give to them? What are the modern uses that can be given to them? So this is one building in Mysore which we have restored and has been converted to a chocolate factory and cafe. So it's a private structure, and it's an interesting restoration work. We also convert buildings to museums. This is right in Bangalore, Nimhans, where one of the buildings which they all are sentimentally connected to and feel uh, emotional about, because it's one of the starting points for Nimhans in that area. So that building was restored and then converted to a museum for Nimhans history. We use all our projects as opportunities for dissemination. So we kind of hold workshops. We just leave our sites open for anybody who's interested to come and see how things are done, how old buildings are restored. So these are some opportunities we create for the people of the city, students of the city. Well, at the same time, as I said, most of these are not protected. So we have to fight for protecting our heritage. There are many campaigns that you all would have read in Bangalore, which Heritage Beku, Intach, and other institutions have all been part of, whether it is Saving Balabruri or Janta Bazaar, where Intach filed a PIL and stayed its demolition. Otherwise, this would have gone, and a new structure was proposed in this typical modern multi-storied buildings. But luckily, there's a stay order now, and they cannot demolish these things. Saving inscriptions. I'm not aware how many of you know of a place called Begur, just on the way to Electronic City beyond Vamanali. Now that place is significant for the temple that's there, the Panchalingeshwara temple, but also the inscription where first time we find Bengaluru mentioned. And this is as old 1,100 years back that we find that. And this inscription was just abandoned in the lot of stones over there. In fact, again, with the help and support of CSR funds, took up an initiative to kind of preserve at least this inscription to begin with. And, kind of within the same temple premises, we made it, we gave it an important space. We gave a text on it. We kind of, so that one could interpret about and know why this is important and why this is highlighted. So these are some of the things which we have done. We document heritage. We kind of, as we said, like there's so much heritage that we need to understand what they are important for. So documentation is one of the first processes that we believe in, which will help us give a deeper understanding of the place, the people who stayed there, why they built it in a particular way, how they lived in that particular house. And those stories is what makes it exciting and more informative for us. We do this documentation and research. So this is our team, which is documenting the water tanks, the Kalyanis of Bangalore. A lot of these temple tanks and tanks which were used in those days for many cultural purposes as well as rituals and so on. So this is an exercise that we've initiated, Sampangi Ramnagar tank, this one with what you can see in the background. And we've done detailed drawings of it, tried to understand how it used to work and what its status is today. We worked on nominating sites in Karnataka for World Heritage. So we were invited by the government of Karnataka to prepare a proposal for nominating Hoysala sites for being World Heritage. And after a 2-year exercise and intense research work done by our team in-house, we've kind of, this proposal is now gone to UNESCO, and we'll get to know in June 2022 what happens to this thing. So these are some of the works that we have been doing with the government, outside the government, with private owners of heritage, all across different sections of people. The other things that we focus on is sharing our knowledge. I'm sorry, did my screen get lost? Okay, I'll share it again. Yeah. And making people understand, as Priya said, like knowing about it. And so that's why we do a lot of heritage walks, because citizens of the city itself should be able to appreciate the city. And that can happen only when they know and understand what is happening over there. So we do a lot of these walks. This is one walk we've done with Vishwanath for the water systems, water supply to Bangalore. Sorry. This is another walk which we've done in the Avenue Road. There was a battle in Bangalore which was fought in 1791. I don't know how many of you are aware. There's a war walk that we do, which starts from Mysore Bank Circle and goes all the way to Tipu's fort, the Bangalore fort that's there, and it gives you a complete idea of what happened during that 1791 battle in which was fought between the British and Tipu, and where they were stationed. They're beautiful maps which tell you the story. There are books which are there. So our heritage walks are done with a lot of research, a lot of content, and we use a lot of archival sources to present those things to the people who join us. We do it for school kids, take them to the heritage sites. And we are doing a program with the schools until the pandemic started. For 2 years we did, where we developed a program, because as again Prasad was saying, that it starts with the young minds. The young minds who are studying here should be aware of what the city is about and why it is such a interesting place. So we've developed a 6-week module which includes heritage visits, to heritage sites, which includes some games, which all these towards helping them appreciate the city, understand the city, know the city better. And these are some images from that. These kids were excited because games and all those things. So we targeted like 5th to 7th standard kids for doing these programs. We do walks tours outside the city also, and specialized workshops whether it is sometimes on archaeology or different concepts of different parts of heritage. We've done one with Ishita on oral history and so on. So a different type of workshops again are conducted again to share this idea that heritage is just not buildings, but there are many dimensions to it and many ways to understand these things. Exhibitions are one way of reaching out to people. The information that we have collected, one of the exhibitions we've had are there were two on different areas of Bangalore, like Alsu, Fraser Town. There was one on then and now, like we have the photographs of buildings that were listed 35 years back, and the same place we have recorded now and seen like how many of these buildings have disappeared and how many of them have been conserved. Intach has brought out this book called Discovering Bengaluru, written by Meera Iyer, who's the convener at Intach, and wonderful documentation, and it takes you through different areas of Bangalore and makes you like walk through them as you read about these places. So about different parts of Bangalore have been recorded in this, like with archival images, archival maps of how Bangalore used to be then, and what are the stories behind it. We've also come up with a book called 11 Stops to the Present, beautifully crafted stories on the city and its past, written for the kids by different authors and edited here by at Intach. So these are again, like most of our programs are supported by different organizations, individuals also, and CSR funds, because again, as we said, like it's a voluntary body. Not all our projects are paid by the government. Some projects are we get as regular projects like any other firm through government, but there are many initiatives which we take through our own ideas and then approach people who can support them. So these are the things which we are doing at Intach, and I'll be more than happy to talk more about it and share some more information if you would like to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pankaj, for giving us a very holistic view of all the action that is possible, because I think the important aspect of this competition is to discuss action for change, not right because we only want to romanticize and be proud, but also because we must act, either whether it's to preserve or it's to manage, or the kind of outreach activities and the engagement which you spoke about. So I think bringing Intach on board for the first conversation was important from this perspective, which opens up the minds of young listeners as to what all can they propose. And I'm sure they must have more questions. So before I move on to questions, if I could request everyone to put in your thoughts or questions in the chat. It doesn't need to be only the moderator's voice. We could rather make it much more inclusive and participatory. So while everyone is thinking about what they would perhaps ask, I'll start with my first question for both Prasad and Pankaj. So when you're thinking about, or when you accepted this invitation, how would you imagine students being able to write or communicate? So what are the aspects about heritage issues that they should keep in mind when they are trying to communicate? And I think I'm emphasizing over here the difference of age group, because so much that both of you said is coming from a space of having worked in this area for at least a couple of decades. And here are students who are going to research, find out something very, very naively, very, maybe the first layer of information. So when they are trying to write or communicate, what are the aspects that they should keep in mind?
Should I take it? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I do agree that the age group makes a difference to the perspectives in which things are seen and so on. However, when students are writing, I would really want them to say why they like anything or why they want to. They know a lot, They would have heard about it or they would have seen things, but it's time that you know why you like, why it is important to you. Second is, is it important to you alone? Is it important to a larger group? Is it important to the city? There can be a personal heritage also, and one can have a complete family albums, personal collection, but there can be something in their own area which can be important to the city also. Many times we find a lot of such things which come across. It would be nice to evaluate that, like, is this being looked at from different categories of. So as students, we always try to explore on the stories that are there. What makes that aspect very interesting, and that's what we try to. Details of it can be brought in later, and the technical information can be brought in later, but if you can connect it to the city and so on, and why it's an identity. Well, it can be anything. It can be food. It can be anything from the culture that they see around them. They may see a water body around them. They may have observed some festival happening over there. Point is, understand that what makes it interesting, what makes it unique for your city, and that's something very interesting, because what we really need to find out is how each city creates its own identity as it evolves. So that will help them, I think. Over to Prasad.
That's a very valid point. I think looking for stories and connections helps us own up to the heritage we are surrounded by. Prasad, how would you answer that question?
I'm sorry, I can't hear anyone at all. Is it? I seem to have lost my sound completely. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Very
we can
well.
hear you very clearly.
I just can't hear you all at all.
Do you want to try reconnecting? Sorry, I should type this out.
Shall I just leave and try and join again?
Yes.
Yes. Priya, could I bring this question to you in the meanwhile? And I'm almost sort of making you a panelist, but because you have been working in these areas, it wouldn't be a wrong move to make. That because we spoke about so much of heritage, right, today. So now I'm imagining when this video is up for, let's say, a resource material for students to think about, they'll be suddenly like, oh, there's so much I can do. But then how do I communicate? If I found something, what should I write about? How do I write about it rather?
Ishita, if I had a choice, and it's been a long time since I was 12 or 15 or 17. Sorry to say that, but it is. But I think one of the best ways to approach it is how I did it at this age. I don't know whether you remember the time when Raghu kind of, in quotes, discovered this mystery locomotive in Indira Gandhi Park. I think the approach has to be, from my point of view, and I think that's something that would make it interesting for me. At this age, it would make it interesting for me if I was in school or college, where the ability to not just learn, but to unravel, to present something as a kind of a mystery, where the deeper you go, the more you learn, and the more you're able to make this cohesive bigger picture. And what surprises and excites me now at this stage, Ishita, is the fact that there are so many mysteries really waiting to be solved, because there's no single truth in heritage. There's always a layer that is viewed differently from from an oral tradition of somebody who lives close by, from a historian, from a book, from a colonial legacy. So there are different versions of it every which way. So I guess for me, the approach that makes sense with me and resonates is the approach of mystery, of investigation, and of having fun with it, honestly.
That's a very nice way of putting it. So from stories, we are moving to investigation. And I think these are very important tools so that, a student or a young learner doesn't feel overwhelmed. I think very, very useful. Prasad, do you want to try? Are we audible to you?
Be on. He's on. He's on. Prasad, just unmute yourself. Maybe you can unmute Prasad, Ishita.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
I'm
did that.
unmuted. Sorry.
Understood. Yeah.
Sorry, I keep losing signal. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Please ask me the question again.
I was just asking, we just spoke about different forms of heritage and different ways of responding to heritage from a very professional's, mindset or a perspective. Now, once I've listened to all of this as a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old, what should I keep in mind when I am trying to communicate my views about heritage as a prospective participant of the competition?
I think that you should really write from the heart, and maybe a good way to start is by looking at what other people have done, what other people have written about heritage, about music, about dance, about literature, about all the wonderful things that Pankaj spoke about, buildings that have historical meaning. Reading is a very useful way of figuring out which direction to go in. And I've always felt that the student who reads is the student who has the most knowledge about a wide variety of things. And when we were students, for us to do research on anything took us forever. Even a small story to be researched meant a week in the library looking at 20 different volumes. And today, you kids, at the click of a button, can go on to Google and just learn everything, download everything in seconds, not even minutes. So, what's there to prevent you from going online and looking at some great heritage writing? See what other people have written about beautiful old buildings in Europe, or about ancient forms of music and dance, about textiles. And that will give you an idea of how to approach the subject, about how to bring the romance back into the story and not just make it a piece of dry historical writing, but make it something that's alive and inspiring and makes other people want to learn about it also. That's my advice to all you young people out there.
Thank you so much. I think this was a perfect combination from looking for stories to looking for mystery and bringing back the romance. I think we put heritage in a much more relatable context already. My next question is about your own education and experiences. So, if you were to reflect back and tell us about your school days, what kind of subjects or learning might have helped you to find this interest that you have found today? What are the subjects with which heritage or history starts connecting and doesn't remain very isolated? So, thinking back about school education.
I think that the subject that inspired me most were English literature, because it encouraged me to read. And like I mentioned, when you read, it unlocks the mysteries of the world. It gives you access to stories that you would never have read otherwise or known about otherwise. And from there came my interest in fashion. And I had a mother and father who were both quite fashionable people who dressed very well. And I always saw them getting ready to go to parties dressed up. So, we had this sort of culture of dressing up and going to weddings wearing finery. And my mother would always say, when you go to a wedding, dress very well, because you have to honor the bride and groom by looking your best. Don't go looking shabby or wearing clothes that are not suitable, because that way you will not be honoring the bridal couple. And I always remembered that. So dressing up was quite important. And then I was very lucky indeed to go to the National Institute of Design, where it was like every window in my mind got opened because of the fantastic library that they had. And we were reading books from every corner of the globe. We were looking at magazines, at periodicals, on interior design, on fashion, on graphic design, on film, on so many different subjects. So, you got quite a 360-degree view of the world. And today, you can go on to many, many websites that have culture as a hashtag or heritage as a hashtag, and look for the. I was at NID. We were very fortunate to meet the great doyens of textiles in India, people like Pupul Jaikar, like Kamla Devi Chattopadhyay, people like Sina Kaul, and of course Chibi Najapa closer to home. These were the women who had decided to revive the handlooms of India after the British had left. Because, Jawaharlal Nehru said to them that our weavers, our artisans, our block printers, our dyers, our embroiderers are all in trouble. And you have to do something about bringing them back to center stage and giving them a livelihood again. And Mahatma Gandhi had very famously said that if you put a charkha in every home, there would be no poverty in India. Did we listen to him? No. So we still have poverty in India, unfortunately. But think about it, creating a self sufficient society by giving people enough work that they can even do at home and earn is a great way of alleviating poverty. And that is why today education has become such a big thing. And schools like Parikrama are doing yeoman service in educating the wonderful young minds of India and putting together, the classroom in such a brilliant way that children are getting so interested in learning. And this was my good fortune to come from a line of people who understood what heritage was, who inspired us and charged us and said, look after handloom, look after khadi, look after the arts of India, the different kinds of weaving techniques, the different kinds of dyeing techniques. Make sure that they always remain fashionable and in people's wardrobes, because that is the biggest service you can do to the textile heritage of your country. So that is where I come from, and I was very, very fortunate to have the right people help me unlock the mystery of, the beauty of heritage in so many different ways. I worked with Intach also in my younger days, and at Intach, I learned so much about the conservation of buildings and why it was important to make the soul of a city always be looked after very well by looking after its old buildings, by always maintaining them well, because that's what would bring the flavor of a city to the forefront. Otherwise, every city would look the same with big modern blocks of flats and soulless buildings that have no beauty. It is those unusual old buildings that give a city its character. And that's what Intach does so beautifully in preserving a lot of the old buildings in India. So, to all you young people out there, look for the subject that interests you. It can be anything. It can be anything to do with history. It can be anything to do with heritage. It can be language. You can study the Kannada language and see where it comes from. You can look at Sanskrit and say, oh my God, this is the oldest language in the world. And I think that we have to take it to new levels and discover new things about it, unlock the secrets of so many different subjects and share it with the world. And I hope that you all will be able to do that very, very well. And I know you will, because young Indians are the cleverest young people in the world. And I know that you all can do a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasad. Pankaj?
Well, yeah, the interest was in many subjects, like the logical subjects of physics and maths, and also history always was a subject of awe, like how did they do it and why did they construct such beautiful large buildings. So that was always an interesting fact that we were looking out for. Now the perspective really changed when I was doing my master's at Delhi school, and then like that heritage is much beyond that. It's like an everyday life around you. It's not that when we say heritage, it's only about looking back. It's to see the past in today's present. So yeah, the perspective, the understanding of the context, all those started changing. History made it more connecting to places. It's like you go to places, what's the first thing that you want to really see is what is unique about that place and what is unique about the food there. And so yeah, now things have moved from awe to understanding the finer nuances of what makes them so much part of that city's identity.
Hmm. Thank you, Pankaj. Thank you.
That I think again something which students can relate to also.
Right. Yes.
Sure, they can feel that okay, that if I go to this place, I can find this, but if I go to the other place, there's something different that's there.
Yeah, so ideally we're talking about connecting, whether it's connecting with the identity of a place or, as Prasad said, connecting with people, and through that their values and understanding of history and heritage. So this brings us back to what Priya was saying, that there are just so many truths and forms to history and heritage, which otherwise perhaps seems like they get lost in the way the educational system currently is. And I'm obviously taking a plunge here by saying that, because we feel that we have to read what's been written in a certain way and believe or agree with it. Whereas I think what we are over here advocating for is to develop your own opinion, to develop your own connection and interpretation of a certain history or a piece or a part of heritage. And I think
To do that, sorry.
Go on,
Sorry,
sorry.
Ishita. To do that, there's something very important. It's like getting an exposure. You need to listen from different voices, different directions. Like what both Priya and Prasad have been saying, you can't be in your own world and look at only one perspective of things. That you need to move out, whether you do reading, whether you talk to people, and you've done that, oral history and all that. Like how you get to know different perspectives from people of how they look at certain things.
Definitely, yes. And this is where I think, not to make it very boring, but research of any kind, whether it's by talking to people, whether it's by reading, whether it's by going and visiting the site yourself, becomes very crucial to any form of opinion building and interpretation. So when we say we want the participants to be able to think of more ways of looking at history, it doesn't need to be purely subjective. Yes, definitely there could be a personal romance or a personal interest, but it also needs to cater to a larger audience, and hence interests of a city or interests of a neighborhood. And that is what could be woven into these essays. This brings me to the third question, and I hope by that time we'll have questions from the audience as well, is how do I now act, right? So it's easier said than done. I at least feel that research is easier and forming an opinion is much easier. But when we say action for change for heritage and history, when so much is at stake, how do you contribute? What are the different ways in which you can contribute? So I'm going to spin the question a little bit and ask you, if any of these students were to come and work, Pankaj, with you, or with the kind of work that Prasad you do, and they were interested in history and pieces of and writing about heritage, how do you see them getting involved in either of your practices? What is it that they can bring as a 12-year-old or a 17-year-old?
I think that as part of an ongoing education, it would be my duty to show them all the various aspects and the various subjects. I mean, I would not limit them only to textiles or to fashion. I would also show them the right websites to go on to learn about architecture, or maybe learn, the history of music or the history of language, like I spoke about, and then to make an informed choice about which subject actually turns them on, which is the one that they want to work with, and then help them choose the right subject and then research it and find out everything about it. Look at it from, through a prism of many facets, look at it from different points of view, because history is a very funny thing. They always say that history is written by the winner of the battle. And it's very true. And that's why in India, sometimes I feel that they've made us feel that we won no battles at all when you read history. But the truth is that we are still here and we exist because we won many battles. That if you look at the Indian the Mauryas, the Cholas, especially the South Indian dynasties, were fantastic. I mean, there was so much of learning, so much of knowledge, so much of sculpture. Look at our temples today. Badami, Halebid, Belur. I mean, it's like something incredible. This is learning that has come through millennia, through thousands of years of learning. And yet, everything has been negated And it all begins to be about, oh, when the British were over here, they created the railway. They gave India the railway. What do you mean they gave India the railway? They gave us the railway because they were taking the riches of India out of the inner hinterland, from the interior parts of India, and shipping it to Bombay and Calcutta and, to the coastline, where it could all be shipped to England. That's why they built the railway. They didn't build the railway to benefit us. Now, there's a bit of history that you can research if you want to. But what I'm trying to say is that as young people, you have to understand that you have to look at history in a very clear, concise, and subjective way. Don't accept what the British have written or what the Mughals have written to be the total truth. It need not be the truth. There has to be a deeper underlying truth in history, which is the real heritage of a country. And maybe it's your generation of students who can find the truth and make it happen and make it shine and make Indians feel really proud of themselves by finding that inner truth of a story, of history, of heritage. Thank you.
That's very interesting. Pankaj, how would you add to that question?
It's basically they have to explore their interest. As I said, heritage, is vast. I mean, and there are different aspects of subjects that we are surrounded with, and each of them have their own history and so on. So at Intach, we welcome, like, if anybody voluntarily comes and says that this is our interest, area of interest, and we said, okay, let's explore together what we can do. And it can be like somebody comes and says, okay, I have 1 month, I want to explore what I can do in heritage. You're welcome. Like, you find your area of it. We are doing certain works, we are already doing certain projects. If you think that interests you, like sometimes when we started this whole program of heritage in schools, so it was just 2 of us who started, and then 1 more person joined us, and then we found that there was a few more teachers who were interested in getting this across to students, because we were doing it all in government schools. So even that was like, as far as you have interest, please join. Like, if somebody is interested in doing only heritage walks, it's fine. So it's an open platform for under the umbrella of heritage. If you have a certain interest, maybe archaeology, maybe art, maybe doing walks, interacting with communities, or doing specific type of workshops, or working with children, it's all open. So these how we work here, like, we have certain projects, either you can join that, or if you have certain ideas, then we have a platform through which we can try to reach people and so on. So both are welcome. Yeah. So I would suggest, I mean, anybody from, irrespective of age group, even if they're young kids who are interested in heritage, want to spend some time on that, want to learn how things are done, maybe, so they can come here, be part of the activities that we do, or if they want to take up a small research on their own, surely that's also welcome.
That's so motivating. I think that's one of the beauties I'm discovering with your responses, that unlike other disciplines, I mean, I would have to think further on this, but definitely history and heritage seem to be very inclusive if we allow it to be. Because I can imagine a doctor cannot say this, that yes, if you don't have the skills, come and explore on a operation table. But here is a subject which does allow you, because it's so much about belonging and about knowing your own history and your own heritage, that yes, you have the scope for exploring. Maybe not go about doing something with a building, but maybe writing about it, or designing a walk, or making a case for something. So that sounds definitely very motivating about the field of history and heritage, especially from a young learner's point of view. At this point, I think I would want to stop, being the only person talking. If anybody in the room wants to add a point, ask a question, say something, anything, even you can use the chat if you don't want to unmute. I think Maurya is a student. Do you want to identify yourself and tell us about yourself? Chirag? I'm not sure if Chirag and Pranil are students.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I have a really bad internet connection. Yes, ma'am.
No, that's okay. So I was just saying, if you want to introduce yourself and if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share. Chirag, if you're saying something, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sure. I had a really good experience of this, and I really don't have any questions. Um, yeah, I can relate to this. It's really nice.
That's good to know, Chirag.
This organization about this is really good, and I can't say anymore. So, thanks.
That's all.
Your surname has hosped, so I'm sure you're like very close to the World Heritage Site of Hampi.
Yeah, I am, but my parents have been there. I've never been there. I want to go there someday because I've heard a lot about it, and I've heard about those. I have watched some of the YouTube videos of Praveen Mohan, and he explains every bit of that. So I just want to go and explore one day out there.
You should, yeah.
Yeah.
Very fascinating site, yeah.
And in the meanwhile, we look forward to what you might have to write about it because you have not been there.
It's very interesting that Chirag spoke about Hampi, because one of the things that people talk about is that in India, when you say visit India, the image that springs to mind is the Taj Mahal. But technically speaking, a lot of historians say that Hampi is actually even more complex than the Taj and has taken sculpture to an entirely different level. But somehow the attention has all gone to the Taj Mahal and Hampi has been neglected. Even I am planning a trip to Hampi at the end of this month, and I haven't been for many decades. And I'm so excited about going and looking forward to it. So, Chirag, I think you've got a great starting point to work on over there. I hope I'll be able to read your essay on Hampi one day.
So actually, in Hampi, in most of the Praveen Mohan's videos, it is told that even Taj Mahal belonged to Brahmins, but after that it was sold to Muslims. Then it was converted into their kind of a thing, and then it was opened once again.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's very correct, Chirag, because
Yeah.
I think the Taj was built during Shah Jahan's reign. So there are records of it having been built, but they do say that it could have been built over a Hindu construction or something like that. But I think it's time to forget all that and move on, and look at Hampi in its entirety, look at the Taj in its entirety as standalone buildings, and maybe try and research the heritage of each part of it. But it'll be difficult to follow stories that maybe are not correct in historical terms. So one has to be careful while researching.
Yeah, I think one of this, the point that it raises is, Chirag, how you will have to be careful about research. I mean, of course, we spoke about everything positive about research, but given the information age that we are in, you'll have to look at what is credible and what is not, and what is the basis of certain materials. Not to say that everybody is bluffing, but definitely there are more reasons to why certain thing is presented a certain way, and you would want to make your own judgment. And there is no denying that you don't have to be 40-50-year-old to be able to make those judgments. You are allowed to form them as a growing adult. Sorry, Pankaj, you were also going to say something?
No, I was just saying the same point what you just mentioned. It's important for us with so much of information coming from all directions and different people. How do we judge what is the good and reliable and credible information? That's a big challenge today, and we have to be very careful when we pick our information.
And I think in that sense, again, there's this contradiction between fields of arts and humanities and on the other hand science, I think it's a little simpler with facts over there, whereas arts and humanities, you will always be in this struggle of authenticating something, and that's a very honest and a much inevitable struggle, because even the one who said it 200 years ago or 500 years ago was still making their own informed decision about something. Except of course we can rely a lot more on maybe a map which says 1950s or a document which says 1930s. But again, that document was made by another brain and another human, and hence information in our field and this side of the river always remains contestable. And I think there's fun in that, and that's where again Priya's point of mystery comes in. We have to learn to keep discovering rather than marry to an idea very early on or very soon. Priya also has a question, I think, for both of you, which is many kids say that I want to talk about and relate to heritage, but I can't. So how do we change that? How do we help? I mean, of course, Chirag said that he can relate to what we spoke about, but there are, of course, many other kids and students who might not be able to.
Make it interesting to them. That's it. Find ways in which they can interact with it, and make it, like you said, sense of discovery, make it explorative for them. I'm sure they love it. They love it. Make it like a game kind of a thing. So these are the ways in which they would enjoy. I mean, at Intach with the schools we have tried, I think some of the workshops by Mason Singh, Sridevi has done a few things, but kids found it so interesting. I think that was in collaboration with the Heritage Beku they had put up. And I think it's just that. Make it interesting to them. Heritage can be fun.
That's the simplest way to put it. Prasad, do you want to add to that?
Sorry, I think that what Pankaj said is very correct. You've got to really make it engaging. You've got to involve people in these stories. And maybe heritage is something that does not really excite young people very much, because it is something you appreciate as you grow older. When you're young, you're really worried about the future, not about the past. But I think that all young people also have to understand that without understanding the past, you'll have no future. It's the only way we have of not repeating our old mistakes, of making sure that we, record history properly, that we make sure that the truth is told. And that's what it's all about, really, at the end of the day. It's about recording the truth. And maybe you can find stories that are related to heritage, that's related to the history of India, that are not completely true. And you can research it and find the truth and correct the narrative. That if you young people were inspired to go digging deep into the past to find the absolutely correct way that things were done. For example, to find out how were those grand temples of India built. I mean, sometimes I go to like a place like Hampi or even to a place like Ellora. It just blows my mind, even the Taj Mahal or any building that you look at that is part of India's history. Such complex, beautiful architecture, such rendition. And I mean, there are foreign experts who say, oh, aliens must have come and done it because human beings couldn't have done it. But that's again trying to take the credit away from India. So it's up to you kids to find the truth and to correct the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prasad, for that last answer. And I think we can close on this point where I think it's important to emphasize we're talking about looking at and engaging with history because it affects our present and our future. I don't think that the contemporary times could have existed the way they do, or even, I don't know, post-contemporary, whichever age we are in, without what all has happened before. So I hope that drives our rest of the conversations and the interest for the participants to write their essays and join us in this initiative. I would like to thank Pankaj and Prasad once again for their time and enthusiasm to further this initiative. I'm sure more people are going to listen to this. We have this live on Facebook, and we'll soon make it available on YouTube as well. I'm also leaving this little note here for those who might catch up on this recording later, that the next session is on 20th, exactly a week from today, 20th of October at 5:30 p.m., where we have Dr. Geeta Badikelia and Dr. Dharmendra Kumar. And this one we will have where one panelist will speak to us in English and the other one will be in Kannada for participants who might find it easier to engage in another language. And this also is to emphasize that the essay writing competition is open to other forms of languages as well. It's not necessary to write only in English, so that you feel more comfortable, more connected to the subject that you pick up. With that, we call this evening a close. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Thank you, Ishita.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you,
God
Priya.
bless.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Pankaj.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Thank you, Chirag. Bye. There will be two more sessions. Gautami, is that you?
Ma'am, it's me, Maurya.
Oh, hi, Maurya. So there will be two more sessions, but on 20th and on 27th. And then the submission for the essays has to be done by 6th of November.
Okay, ma'am.
Yes?
Okay, ma'am.
All right. Nice to hear your voice, Maurya.
Okay. Bye, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Maurya. Bye.